Hello everyone. So today I'm going to be trying to persuade you about the ethics of human cloning and why that it shouldn't be feared so much and that maybe it's good for society. So, like many of you, you have probably heard of Dolly the sheep way back in 1996, but why has no one ever heard of the equivalent one for a human, like a human clone? Why has there not been one? You'd think it'd be the next logical step in the field, and it seems obvious, but there still hasn't been one because there have been many things holding it back. But should they? Turns out we are able to clone humans, just it's not exactly easy. We have cloned embryos a couple years ago, and if we do provide human clones, they could be easy organ donors for humans and help aid in curing many diseases. While there may be many ethical issues surrounding the cloning of humans, is it really worth holding back the future of society? I've always been interested in this topic and the evolution of technology, so it should be an interesting read. So before we get started, let's watch this video about cloning by Discovery.
And you're wondering. So here's a list of animals that have been cloned. Not on that list, humans. Yet. Sorry, you go. So just how important is cloning technology? And should we be worried about evil clone armies in the future?
Cloning has played a role far larger than I think it's likely to play in the future of science and medicine. The money, the ability to do something useful with cloning is probably over on the research side of cloning, not on the reproductive.
That means cloning to create stem cells that can grow into replacement organs. And while that's pretty cool, science fiction likes to take it one step further.
I think Hollywood is absolutely in love with the idea of human cloning. They can sort of use it as the archetypical villain. Cloning fears play on a couple of things. They sort of challenge our notion of uniqueness and individuality. They also sort of raise the issue of, how much of who we are can be duplicated or replicated or manufactured.
Like TVs or alarm clocks or cell phones or Pop-Tarts.
Hey, look what I found.
But even if a cloned person was created, that doesn't mean it would be an exact copy of the original.
We're not merely the kind of automatic readout of our genes. We should think of our genome as a kind of diary, but not a diary that has been written upon yet.
Which means that you, version 2.0, would have a very different set of experiences than the original you. Why are you dressed like that? I was at the pirate bar. They made me an honorary pirate. Arr, is this thing still rolling? Where are you going? While some groups claim to have cloned human embryos or even delivered an actual cloned baby, there's no proof of it.
So any effort to try to make a baby by cloning, given the very, very high probability that the baby's going to be seriously abnormal, is just completely morally unjustifiable.
Both Murray and Kaplan support a ban on cloning for reproductive means, but neither think that ban should extend to stem cell research. So is there any chance we'll actually see a human version of Dolly the sheep?
We're going to have to prove that it can really be developed safely without death and deformity in animals. If that happens, then we might see someone try to clone a human being for, to have an offspring in 30 or 40 years.
Even then, Kaplan sees reproductive human cloning as a red herring for more pressing bioethical questions on the horizon.
I think what we need to be worried about is efforts to improve, enhance, and optimize human beings, either by putting technology into them or by changing their genetic makeup. I think we have much more to worry about with cyborgs than I do clones.
Oh great, so instead of huge evil clone armies to deal with, we'll just have to worry about cyborgs.
Alright, so as you can see there, an interesting video talking about everything. So let's switch over to our PowerPoint. Alright, so that video goes into the details of human cloning and that there is some ethics and stuff about it, but it can be good for the future of our society. So let's start at the beginning. So everyone knows about good old Dolly the sheep. This was the first ever cloned mammal through reproductive cloning, which is the process of taking cells from a certain animal and another one and then cloning them with an electric shock to get them to multiply and then putting it into a host. That was how Dolly the sheep was created, and it was a marvel in technology way back in 1996. And it was very big in the news and everyone was talking about it, and everyone was wondering when the next thing was going to happen. While there have been many animals since then, there hasn't been a human yet, which is kind of surprising until you really think about it. So the big problem with working on humans is the risk. You know what I mean? Like when you're working on a sheep, you don't have to worry about injuring it or messing it up or even killing it as much because one, they live less and the ethics around it aren't as bad. It is a sad subject, but people don't care much about a sheep dying as to a human, which is a much bigger ethical quandary there. So, yeah. And also, the gestation period of a human is much longer, so there's a longer probability for the embryos to expire or end up with abnormalities. And then the huge hurdle is the logistics of everything. You have to deal with getting all the egg donors, which need to be qualifying candidates, and the even harder part is getting surrogates to carry them, which is not an easy task because it puts their lives at risk too. So let's get to the chase here. We all know human cloning could benefit society, and there's some valid reasons it can. The one often heard about is that organ donors. Now, organ donors can be very valuable to society, but the way people keep currently talking about is cloning a human just to be harvested is where everyone gets little bad, the ethical reasons come up. Now, just because we're saying clone organs doesn't mean we're cloning a person just to get harvested. That is an option, but it's not the best option. The process of human cloning, we can clone the actual organ itself and use that without having them even make a human. And it is much more moral, obviously, than killing a human. So we could just clone the actual cells using stem cell technology. And that is why we haven't really had a human clone, because that's the big reason why you would clone a human. And since you could just do that, and it's much easier and more ethical, almost all of our technology and science is going in that direction. With the stem cell technology, we can edit the genes of a human, doing all sorts of stuff like that. Like with genome editing, we can fix childhood issues and make the child mortality rates much lower by fixing those issues directly by their DNA. Now, this brings up another dilemma where people talk about the designer baby, talking about, you know, just becomes more of a not a health concern and more of just plastic surgery kind of stuff. While that is a good point to make up, it could be regulated just like that stuff, and it shouldn't be for that. The person should have their own choice on what happens to their body, and only for health concerns should the parent step in for stuff like that. And then that brings up yet another issue. As you see, it's like a chain. The religious issue of manipulating the human and its purity and all that stuff. So some say it's against God's creation because of human it isn't sacrilegious, but this is probably far from the truth because we all know the human body is not well designed and was not even technically designed to begin with. The human body is technically just an evolutionary adaptation of an older ape four-legged ancestors. But the human body has issues like back issues because of how quickly we went from four legs to two legs, tendons that can break very easily, like the Achilles, and cannot repair very well. And our breathing system is not well designed for choking hazards. So the whole purity of the thing is not a great con against it. You can still have the religious views against it, but it's not a great point to make against it. But everyone's the right to their own opinion with that, and people should be able to choose what they want to do with their body, just like other things. Continuing with the ethics, there's the very prevalent evil clone scenario that people like to make, that if you clone a bad person, they will become bad too, which is completely untrue, as identical twins technically share the same DNA, but they are not the same person. And also, the way a person acts in life is highly dependent on how they were raised, which is a big vital part in the role, not the way their genetics were made. For example, people always quote that you could make Hitler a clone and it would cause World War III, but they forget the reason he became so vile was because of his horrible life in Germany after World War I. The economy was terrible, his bad parents, and the ways of his life. Cloning him today would be completely different if he had the right upbringing, and hopefully it wouldn't be as bad. So the villain debate isn't too great of an idea. And the final one, the one that should be considered the most and the big reason why we haven't done it, is the health concerns. Health concerns are a big issue with this, as stated earlier. Cloned subjects do not last long as embryos, which is one of the reasons we haven't done so well, and risking the death of a surrogate is a big no-no. Obviously, these are issues, and But the thing is, these issues happen even without cloned subjects, such as miscarriages and birth defects always happen even in uncloned people. So it's kind of like the self-driving car things where they could still get in accidents, but they technically are still not that bad. And also, this is disqualifying the fact that technology won't get better. Everything gets better over time as the technology develops, so maybe in the future it won't be so bad. So it should not be ignored and taken as a permanent reality that these health concerns will be permanent. Either way, the scientists will continue to work on this tech, and it's better to try and watch it closely and try to make sure it is safe and ethical instead of trying to shun it immediately and ignore it for the future of our society. These new advancements will hopefully make us a better human race and should not be ignored. And I hope I persuaded you, but you have the right to your opinion. Thank you for listening.